I'm just turning on YouTube audio. Can someone go check to make sure it's on?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Test. Okay. Let me turn it off.
Say something again, Kurt.
It works. It's good. Okay. I don't know if you're ready for this, but
Welcome to the ISSessions virtual meeting.
Oh my God.
Kurt, I can't hear anything on YouTube.
It worked for me, so
Yeah,
and
okay.
it's going through the mixer. By the way, if
Perfect,
anybody has some intro music to go with that, you know, hit up your boy. And speaking of your boy, my name's Kurt. I hope you're feeling great on this fine Thursday evening. So taking a look at our schedule, got me, got the news roundup with familiar faces, Adam Yusuf. Right after, we had another familiar face, Nick doing the Reaper rundown. And then we got some new faces, Jem, Nishad, working with Luai to go through some SMB hacking and defending. So we got red team and blue team. Before I hand it over to Adam and Yusuf on the news roundup, I just want to say that if you're at all interested in being a part of these meetings, or doing a presentation or something, or a project that you want to show off, let us know. We can include you. We can even give you credit towards the co-curricular recognition. So if you want some extra, some extra oomph to your, sorry, one sec. So you want some extra oomph to your transcripts, really help out. If you're not part of Sheridan, I can't help you, except we can link you to your social media or GitHub pages and get some recognition there. Yeah, so without further ado, take it away. Adam and Yusuf.
Here. Hi, everyone.
Hey there, guys.
Okay. So the U.S. Secret Service sent out a security alert last month, so June 12th. So this was actually the Global Investigations Operations Center, so I guess a branch of the U.S. Secret Service. This is pertaining to MSPs, so managed service providers. So what they do is they manage services for customers, generally businesses. So the MSPs usually employ a server-client architecture. So for example, think about like Office 365. You can either host it locally in your data center, or you can have Microsoft host it. In that case, Microsoft would be the MSP. And so the risk is introduced if an MSP is compromised. All the different clients are also risk being attacked. So attackers can pivot off of it, and that's what they've been. The U.S. Secret Service has been observing. So attackers have compromised MSPs and then pivoted into the client's internal networks to deploy ransomware, point-of-sale intrusions, and also business email compromise scams. Threat intelligence firm Armor has identified at least 13 MSPs that were hacked in 2019 to deploy malware. And this is actually not the first time the National Security Communications Integration Center, a mouthful, they've sent one out in 2018. The difference being last time it was pertaining to a state-backed hacking groups targeting cloud-based MSPs through their supply chain. Now we're seeing attacks being carried out by day-to-day cybercrime gangs. So it's a change in who's committing these kinds of attacks.
All right, so this one's a little bit interesting. And we usually, as of late, don't usually hear a lot of vulnerabilities within Linux. But as of late, it's been more and more frequent. So this one by a report by Intezer Labs reported a new backdoor Trojan. They're calling it Doki. And it was part of an old threat actor that targeted web servers for crypto mining. The threat actor they're calling is ngrok, and they're calling it that because it uses ngrok services for control and command servers, and it's been active since at least 2018. Now, hackers, as of late, have been targeting Docker installations where their management APIs have been left completely exposed. And then so they abuse the Docker APIs to deploy new servers. These servers are Alpine Linux machines, and the purpose of this is to allow hackers to simulate normal crypto mining operations while controlling over the Dogecoin wallets. So whenever they want, they have access to do essentially whatever they want. If we go to the next slide, I have a diagram from the article that kind of explains what's really going on. So essentially, once a Docker container is deployed in the target environment and it uses the misconfigured Docker API, three things end up happening. First, the Doki Trojan is deployed, which monitors mining operations and communicates with a command and control server. And you see that right in the middle right here. The second thing that happens is a cron job is created to maintain persistence on the box by constantly re-downloading the malware. So it'll communicate with whatever it's communicating with to ensure that the malware stays installed on the system, and you see that on the right-hand side. And on the left, a scanner is deployed to look for additional victims, essentially misconfigured Docker API hosts on cloud servers like AWS and DigitalOcean and other things. And that's how the malware expands and goes to other machines and other servers.
So ErgoChat is a secure phone company. They provide secure messaging, and they also sell Android phones to go along with that service. Some of the features with their phones is the ability to run two Android operating systems. So one is a regular inconspicuous Android OS, and the other one is ErgoChat, where you can carry out your secure communications with other ErgoChat users. The device also has the camera and GPS removed. And one of the things about this company in particular is you can't buy these phones in the store. You have to know a guy that knows a guy, and then you can buy the phone. They also offer a subscription model for users, and that's how they've also been able to monetize this. This service has become popular in criminal networks in Europe and the Middle East and elsewhere, but primarily in those regions. So because of their selling points about being secure and having like those secure wipe features and those types of things. So the police infiltrated the company's network infrastructure to drop a tool onto all the different Ergo phones to allow them to listen in on conversations and also disable security features. The police would then intercept those messages and then forward them to the relevant EU agencies to make arrests. So that, as you can imagine, this led to a huge number of arrests. This has also gained insight into criminal organizations like never before, because these criminals have been like brokering like drug deals and other criminal activities over their chat, and they thought that it was secure. So they were pretty obvious about it. And this has been the largest law enforcement infiltration in history. The French police say they're the ones that carried out this operation. The French police say 90% of ErgoChat users were engaged in criminal activity. So like rip any of the innocent like privacy-oriented users that were using this service, if there was many. But the investigator says you can contact them to remove your private data from the investigation if you're affected by this and don't think you did anything wrong.
They have to contact the police to get their stuff.
Yes, privacy-oriented. They want privacy-oriented people to go contact the police and tell them who they are. I don't think they're going to get a lot of requests. No. They also invited, because this company has been quite shady and like quite mysterious regarding like who owns it and kind of who works there. They also invited administrators or managers of ErgoChat itself to contact them if they wanted to discuss the legality of law enforcement like carrying out this operation. So like that's another thing where like I don't think they'll get many people wanting to take them up on that offer, but
Yeah, it's definitely a double whammy.
yeah, for sure. It's like we got you. So if you got a problem, let us know. Anyways.
So this one's kind of really interesting actually. So essentially, Waydev is a platform, and it runs a platform that allows users to track their work output by analyzing their Git contributions. So when a user registers for the Waydev platform, Waydev receives their OAuth token to access the user's GitHub or GitLab projects. Now, what an OAuth token is essentially it allows you to give certain permissions through a token to a certain other platform. So whoever has that OAuth token has the permissions that you have given them through that token to access whatever projects or Git projects that you have on your GitHub or GitLab. So essentially, if that fell into the wrong hands, that wouldn't be good. But that's essentially what happened. So a group of hackers did a blind SQL injection, and it caused these hackers to access what the article said as a small subset of its customers' tokens. So essentially, GitHub was the one, their security teams were the ones that discovered the breach and informed GitLab. Both groups ended up regenerating the tokens, and now the old tokens are essentially meaningless. However, two large companies did blame Waydev for the breaches, and I'll get into that in a second. But Waydev did release hackers' information, which is very uncommon, but they released their IPs, emails, and user agent strings. Now, the two large companies that blamed Waydev for their breaches that happened to their company due to the breach that happened to Waydev is a loan app called Dave.com and software testing and a software testing service called Flood.io. So in the next slide, we'll see a article from Dave for Dave.com, and essentially it just shows that the it's fine. It's not there. It's fine. Just stay on this slide. But essentially, what happened was 7.5 million users got breached. So their real names, phone numbers, emails, birth dates, and home addresses were leaked on. So their entire database was completely was leaked. The data also included social security numbers, but they were encrypted. So I guess that's okay. And passwords were also leaked, but they were encrypted using bcrypt. So one hack on one system caused a bigger hack on another system. Something that happens, but it's kind of cool to see it happen like this.
And it's not uncommon for developers to, for example, add different services to their repositories or generate OAuth tokens. Yeah, to get some kind of other third-party service to interact with their repository. So that's normal behavior. You just need to make sure that OAuth token that you generate is unique and has just enough permissions to do what it needs. So yeah, kind of unfortunate.
Okay.
So with the next one, so basically there's an automated attack scanning for external, there's an automated attack scanning for exposed databases on the internet. Once that script discovers a database that's exposed, it goes ahead and wipes the data and implements a calling card, which is Meow. So people have been referring to it as being meowed when the data is wiped. So initially, the attack started off targeting Elasticsearch and MongoDB. It now supports other databases as well, and also some other different technologies such as Jenkins and network-attached storage devices. So they wiped approximately 1,800 databases so far. One of the first victims was a VPN provider. And ironically enough, a security researcher actually notified the organization of the exposed Elasticsearch database. They fixed it for 5 days and then re-exposed it on the internet. And then they promptly got meowed. So yeah, we still don't know who's behind the attacks. One of the researchers actually observed the attackers using a Proton VPN. So yeah, we still don't know who's behind it.
Adam, you can skip the slide. This was the slide that I just talked about the Dave.com. If you want to see at the bottom here, though, it was just a database that they had of the leaked information.
Sure. Do you want to go ahead and you mentioned
Yeah,
some
sure.
interesting things about that?
Yeah, so essentially you can see like this was essentially what was leaked on. So you can see the first column has what would seem to be, I guess, ID numbers. And then you have the blurred out phone numbers, a bunch of nulls, I guess. I don't know what they would pertain to. But then you have the first names, and what's kind of what I find kind of cool is all these low balance alerts, which I found kind of funny. But essentially, it's just really cool how it's unfortunate, but really cool how, again, like Adam said, just through a couple of OAuth tokens, a company was able to gain access to another company's source code for their applications and be able to
Give me 1 second. Switching the slides. There we go. Okay. So source code from dozens of companies has been leaked. So there was a developer and reverse engineer that basically collected private code from more than 50 companies. Basically, how he acquired it was he managed to find these companies' repos that were he was able to find these through publicly exposed repositories. And as he was collecting them, people have also contributed other source code. So that's how he was able to acquire that many repositories. So some companies that have been affected are like Microsoft, Adobe, Lenovo, AMD. These are all marked like proprietary and confidential source code. The leaker identified that there was some hard-coded credentials present in the easily accessible repositories, which is not a good sign. The collector removed the credentials if that was the case before going ahead and posting them on his GitLab account. So some takeaways are companies should better protect their DevOps tools. Sometimes it's challenging where that network perimeter is, but you still have to make sure that it's not just your DevOps tools aren't exposed, especially source code. And also one of the interesting things that the article pointed out was the use of SonarQube. So SonarQube is a SAS, so static code analysis tool. What it does is it searches, you point SonarQube to a repository, and it'll scan the code and look for any common patterns that will lead to a vulnerability. So the leaker actually identified SonarQube as one of the pivot points to leaking a few of their repositories, which I thought was kind of interesting. So yeah.
what I found really like cool about this is how like you can like really tell that essentially like people may think just throwing in a bunch of tools and a bunch of plugins and whatnot is the best way to go, just because you have so much doing so much. But having all of them not being able to communicate with each other or not being compatible with each other really makes things worse than better. So I just thought that was interesting.
Right. Well, I mean, with the DevOps tooling, like you want to build out a pipeline to automate things. The thing
Right.
is you tend to create more problems than you solve sometimes.
Exactly.
Like you'll be like, I want to automate this thing, but then I got to do this thing, and then like, but I have this problem now, so I got to fix it with this thing. So
Yeah.
I mean, like, DevOps is really cool. It allows you to, it does provide some valuable benefits, but the thing is, it's kind of like a bit of like a bit faster than slow. So sometimes it leads to mistakes like these. So yeah.
So this was kind of interesting. Essentially, these routers, the ASUS RT AC1900P home router, it's a high-end, high-bandwidth home device. And a group found a couple security holes in the router's firmware in late 2019. And ASUS did patch them. However, they patched them very dully, if you may. The bugs are related to the router's firmware update process. So the update patches would have actually updated the system itself, which is kind of nifty. And so the bugs would have done two things, essentially. They would have allowed bogus firmware updates, wouldn't have had any digital signature checking during their download. So in theory, what could have happened is crooks could advertise a fake update or subvert a genuine one, and it would go completely undetected. It would do this by, since most routers, and in this case this router does use Linux tools, it uses the wget command, which I'm pretty sure we're all fairly familiar with. And so wget organizes downloads accordingly, and when used correctly, it uses HTTPS links. However, the firmware in this version of the router had the no check certificate option selected, so bogus downloads wouldn't be affected. The article says, and I quote, "Don't check." I mean, sorry, not the article. The man page for the wget says, "Do for that option. Don't check the server certificate against the available certificate authorities. Also, don't require the URL hostname to match the common name presented by the certificate." So nifty, but not good. And then the other one would just allow JavaScript to run through your browser without any warning. So all the crooks or hackers would need is to throw in some JavaScript into the release notes, and through certain commands that would inject that JavaScript into a page that would be served up by the router through one of its URLs.
So the first American financial corporations is in hot waters. So the company, through its publicly available site, has exposed 885 million records. So this pertains to like financial statements, so like banking account numbers, bank statements, mortgage, tax receipts, social security numbers, like anything that you don't want exposed. The vulnerability appears to have been introduced in a software update in May 2014. And actually, the company company had a penetration report done in December 2018, which did discover the vulnerability, but the organization didn't patch. And for 6 months, and then 6 months later, there was a breach that happened that notified people of this vulnerability. The New York State Department of Financial Services is currently investigating the incident and determining if any penalties should be applied. So that it's quite. This is the first time that that organization, the New York State Department of Financial Services, is investigating cybercrime enforcement action. But there's a catch to this because this goes so back. Actually, the company only stores weblogs until June 2018, so it would be hard to determine which records got accessed going back all the way to 2014. So it'll be interesting to see which way the courts go with this, whether they make the assumption that all of the data was compromised or only the ones that are provable. So the hearing is scheduled for October 26th. So we'll know more by then.
So I think this is probably my favorite one. This is just really funny, in my opinion. But so essentially, it's titled "A Vigilante is Sabotaging Emotet botnet by replacing malware payloads with GIFs." Botnet works by spamming targets with emails, and these are phishing emails. So they're perpetrating to be business-related communications. And so in the emails either contain malicious Office documents or a link to a malicious Office file that users are told to download on their PCs. So when the payload is downloaded, automated scripts download Emotet malware from their hacked WordPress sites. Now, what's iffy on Emotet's part is all their passwords are the same across all their websites or all their platforms that they use. So this vigilante guessed the password or somehow got access to it, and and replaced all their malware with GIFs instead of Emotet malware. And you can see on this slide some of the GIFs that were being sent to the to-be victims. So it's just kind of funny, and it's cool to see that they're, instead of people always hacking, there's like actual, I guess you could say, TV computer vigilantes, sort of like Mr. Robot out there that are trying to do some good in the world. So it's funny. I like it.
Yeah, it's a good use of of wrecking someone's
Exactly,
operation.
right? Like, and if you, yeah, it's a really good one. I like
Wait,
it.
what? Did the users also see this? Like this
Yeah.
just popped up.
So essentially, from what I understand, is like the emails that they would get, it would contain a download. They download the file. When they opened it or like unzipped it or something, a GIF would pop up instead of like a Word document where they'd have to press enable editing. So.
So it's like a kind of a problem with a lot of cyber criminals. Like their OPSEC's really bad, so you
Exactly.
can point to this and be like, "You see, this is why."
This is what happens when you're foolish, or
Yeah, absolutely. So many of you probably heard that a lot of a bunch of popular Twitter accounts have been part of a crypto scam. So Twitter, based on Twitter's investigations, the scammers were able to use social engineering to gain access to Twitter's internal tools to manage Twitter. With this access, they were able to access accounts on the platform, which they used to send out tweets using popular accounts. The scammers basically sent tweets asking users to send them Bitcoin. Some of the accounts that were used were like Elon Musk, Apple, Uber, etc. This resulted in the company temporarily locking out high-profile verified accounts. And one of the good things about this was Twitter was really proactive with or as far as I know, Twitter has been pretty proactive with communicating to users about the breach. So they sent out tweets about what actions they're taking. And also crypto exchanges went ahead and blocked the wallets of the scammers to prevent users from sending cryptocurrencies to those wallets. So kind of that's the takeaway that I want to highlight is like, having good communication allows people to get ahead of this. So yeah.
Not really a news story, but something that I thought would be very applicable to all of us. And so it's this article. I think it was posted July 20th. I'm not too sure. I think, yeah, July 20th by Krebson. Krebson, sorry. And essentially what it is advice for people looking into entering the cybersecurity industry. And what it says, and I recommend that everyone read this simply because it's got a really a lot of information that is very beneficial to all of us. And so it just simply says that students lack hands-on experience with the more practical concerns of operating, maintaining, and defending the information systems which drive their businesses. It references a survey done by the SANS Institutes, and I'll show you the results in a little bit. But one thing that I found interesting about this article is that it said that most successful InfoSec professionals that the author knows didn't have a certificate or a degree, just a very keen and sharp passion for the field. Now, I'll preface the article because the article did say this as well. It's not to say that we shouldn't get a degree or we shouldn't pursue a higher education. All that is very, very important. But I think the biggest takeaway from something like this is to just make sure that you have the passion for it. You're constantly trying to learn more. And one of the things that it also does mention, and it says like very, very blatantly and very boldly, is having a support group. So sort of something like ISSessions right here. So I think that we're all on a really good page or on a really good stepping stone to improving our careers. But it's just always trying to better ourselves and be a better InfoSec professional. So on the next slide, if you could switch to the next slide, Adam. Right here, you can see on the first column, it says % of cybersecurity job candidates who were unable to perform even basic tasks. So you can see something like computer exploitation techniques which my boys Jem and Nash and Luai are going to be helping us out today with. Only 66% of entry-level positions that were filled were able to complete weren't able to complete basic tasks. And on the other hand, on the other column, you have something where only 4.5% of those people were actually able to demonstrate a hands-on mastery. Not to say that we need to have that mastery level, but just to be able to complete basic tasks is something that we should all be able to pursue, in whether it be computer architectures, networking, Linux, programming. I feel like that's very slept on within our within like us as InfoSec professionals. But apparently it's very important according to the article. So yeah, interesting stuff.
For sure. Yeah, it's generally like a good idea. Like, you know, if you want to make recommendations on technology, you should understand the technology.
Exactly.
And so, you know, this is a revolving field. So that's one of the things that I like about it, is you learn something new every week.
100%. 100%.
So now kind of let's get into the rapid fire stuff, because we're a little bit over time. So basically, one of the things I wanted to point out was there was a 2020 cyber resilience organization study by I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, but Phenom. I'll give it a shot. Phenom Institute. It surveyed about 3,000 IT security professionals. Basically, the gist of it is less security tools, the better. They've observed better detection and faster remediation. So kind of consolidating tools is generally a good idea.
So if you were here last week or watched the not last week, last meeting, you heard me talk about the Clearview AI and how they were keeping record of everybody's facial images online, and they weren't letting Canadians opt out while they were letting most other countries opt out. Well, now you can opt out, but to opt out, you have to provide another picture of yourself to opt out, because the company quotes, our database searches using pictures, not names. Also, if your opt-out goes through, your photos aren't going to be deleted. They're going to be de-identified.
Okay, well, good to see they made the change.
Yeah.
So basically, just a quick Office update. So Microsoft announced some new features for their Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection. So basically, emails. So it allows, in Q3, they're gonna better allow Outlook admins to identify which users are being constantly bombarded with phishing emails. And then in 2014, they're going to be blocking email forwarding by default. So that's really good, because we've seen attacks where or not personally me, but we've seen attacks where an email address will be compromised and they'll forward emails to a different user, and that's how you get information leakage. So it's good to see that will be blocked by default. I just have to so yeah, that's it for the news segment. Next is Nick with his repo rundown. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. For anybody that wants to have links to those news stories, I pasted them in the news channel. And if you have questions for Adam or Yusuf, stick around after the end of the meeting, and they will try to answer them for you. Next up, is Nick. Let me find him. There you are. Cool. Take it away, Nick.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Hi, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. So this time on the rundown, I'm going to do a program called Findsploit. It's basically just a simple bash script that lets you search your local machine and a couple of online sources for exploits. The author is Zero Day, who is the, founder of Zero Day Security. There's a link to the repo right there if you want it. So again, the author's description is that it's just a bash script that kind of eases searching for exploits for you. It's mostly like a convenience thing. The repo does contain two smaller programs too, called CopySploit and CompileSploit, but I'm not even going to go into them because they're basically like giant wrapper scripts for a CP command and a GCC compile command. Like, they're, in my opinion, a little bit unnecessary, but whatever. So anyways, to install this thing, you just clone the GitHub repo, you cd into the directory, and then you type /install. If your user doesn't have like apt-get install permissions, you might need to sudo that command. But so installation's pretty easy. It doesn't need any prerequisites or anything. Like I said, it does use the apt install system. So I guess your OS needs to support that. So like Debian or Ubuntu or something like that. To use this program, you basically type Findsploit. And I mean, you can type Findsploit update, and it will update the software itself using kind of a hacky mechanism that I'll show you later, but it's fun. And then regular usages, you type Findsploit, and then up to 3 search terms. It basically treats each word as a unique keyword that it uses to search. So a couple of examples, you type Findsploit and Windows, and it will search a couple of databases for any exploit that has the word Windows in like the name or the description or whatever. You can add 2 keywords like payloads and TCP. If you know the Metasploit exploitation framework at all, they kind of have categories of exploits, and one of those categories is like payloads that you can run. So likely it will find results in there that have the word TCP somewhere. So like a TCP reverse shell or something like that. And that's basically what this thing does. It just then provides you a list. So here's a screenshot of what it looks like. So first off, yay, ASCII art, because we love ASCII art. And then up towards the top there, you see obviously the user must have searched for Heartbleed. And it shows, it found a hit on an Nmap script to scan for Heartbleed, a couple of hits inside the Metasploit exploits repositories, some on ExploitDB. And what's not shown in the screenshot is it will also spin up a bunch of browser tabs with links to like Google searches and Shodan searches and stuff for your keyword across different like exploit sites. So what does a repo look like? There's 2 folders at the top, MSF search and Nmap. Both of those folders just contain a single text file. The text file in the MSF search folder is just a text version of all the stuff that ships with Metasploit. So a bunch of pre-built payloads and exploit modules and things like that. The Nmap directory, again, is just a list of all the scripts that ship by default with the Nmap port scanner. And then the rest of the files are like the license, the documentation, then the 3 programs, CompileSploit, CopySploit, and Findsploit. Like I said, compile and copy are just front ends to like a single Linux command. Findsploit is what you're actually running most of the time. Then it comes with like a desktop icon. That Findsploit.png file is actually just a screenshot that I showed you, and the installation script. So the 2 surrounded in red are the only 2 that I want to talk about. So when the tool installs, like when you run install.sh, does a couple of things. First off, it sets up some color macros for your terminal so that it can print stuff in fun colors like blue and red and green, orange. Then it prints ASCII art because awesome, and some info about the author and usage instructions as well. Just to show you kind of how easy an install script can be, I highlighted in red the parts that actually matter. Everything that's not in red is like, making a directory or deleting a previous installation. But really the way this thing installs itself is, since you're running install.sh from inside the directory that you cloned from Git, it already knows that it's sitting in the location with all the files. So it copies them into an install directory, which I think is /user/share. Then the second box I have in red there is apt-get install exploitdb, which is just a tool that can query exploitdb. The next box basically sets execute permissions on the 3 scripts that I mentioned, so find, copy, and CompileSploit. And then the last thing it does is it makes symlinks to those from the install directory into your /user/bin folder so that you can just type them on the command line, because those 3 location, or that location /user/bin should be in the user's path. So you don't have to like type the full path to run this thing. You just type Findsploit or CompileSploit. It copies over the desktop icon and prints some status messages, but really that's this install script. It copies the data into a location, installs one package, sets execute permissions, and then makes some soft links. So the actual program, when you run Findsploit, what does it do? When it starts off, it declares a few variables. Up at the top there, something I'm going to refer to in a minute is the version number, because the update mechanism, while a bit hacky, hey, it works. But right now, so this one would be like version 2. It defines a few paths. So for example, the directory that the Nmap and Metasploit data is in, which are the second two things that I have. The third is the command to execute the browser from the command line for your operating system. So the default one here, they've just put the term Firefox. So you're going to run that on the command. I mean, you can replace it with like, Chromium or Chrome or whatever browser you can access from the command line. And then in Linux, to access your command line parameters to the script, typically you refer to them by like $1, $2, and $3. Here, the author's just putting them into variables with actual variable names because I guess it makes it readable. On the right there, you can see they define some more colors for pretty printing stuff in the terminal. After that, again, they define a sweet function for printing the ASCII art logo. So then the update function, and I'm including, this is what we would call a dirty hack, right? Like there are good ways to update software, and I just wanted to include an update feature ways of updating software. This is the latter. So what happens is the author executes, we're looking at the first box here, a curl command, which fetches a web page from the internet. They're actually curling GitHub's API for their own project and looking up all of the tags for this. So when you commit code via GitHub, you can add tags to a certain commit to like give it a name and stuff like that. So they're finding all the tags. Then inside the tags, they're grepping for the word name. Okay, and then they're stripping out anything. That's what, like they're basically just grabbing this whole line with the name on it. There could be a bunch of tags in there with a bunch of names. So head -1 means grabbing the first result, which is going to be the tag. And then the cut C11 to 13 part basically isolates the characters 2.0 out of that name field. So basically they're like using like text processing tools to grab the tag, which happens to be the most recent version of the software. The reason I say this is like a dirty hack and it's buggy is like, what happens if GitHub changed the way they render? If they put in an extra space or like, they move things around a little bit, this would no longer fetch the correct version number. So that's why I say it's a little bit hacky. Like there would probably be better ways to process this with like a JSON parser or something, but whatever. So you've isolated the characters 2.0. You compare that to that variable that we defined at the start of the program. And if those are the same, then you've got the current version. If those values are different, the program asks you, hey, do you want to update the program? And if you say yes, basically it clones the GitHub repo and it goes through that install process that I talked about in the first couple of slides where you clone it, you cd into the directory, and then it runs install.sh. So it kind of like can update itself. Again, dirty hack, but whatever, it works. And if it works, that's great. The actual script itself, once it starts running, right? So I've typed Findsploit and I've typed a couple of keywords. It all boils down to like basically like these two commands. So yeah, there's some like pretty printing of text, but really it runs egrep, which is just an extended version of grep, which is a thing that searches for text patterns across files in Linux. So it just searches that nmap script directory for the variable that you typed. And if you typed 2 more keywords, it searches for those as well. It uses the like auto coloring switch in grep so that your output is, in color. That's fun. And then it does the same thing for the that giant text file for any of the keywords that you typed, and it prints them to the command line. But that's really all it is. This is just a giant glorified front end for searching 2 text files for the keywords that you use. The next thing it does, the third line here, search exploit script and vars, that's using that that exploit DB tool that it installed during the installation process to query print the exploits. Then it prints a list of all the websites it's about to search. Notice that these are just echo commands, so we're not opening these in a browser yet. It's just printing so that if you want to continue with search like exploit DB, it's going to search Google and the words you typed with the word exploit on the end. And then the next 4, you can see they've added the site kind of keyword to Google. So they will search security focus, ODay today, security database, and package store, which are sites that tend to have lists of exploits. It also searches Shodan and Vulner, basically all just for your keywords. Okay, so if you clicked yes and you wanted to do these, what it does here, all the boxes that I've highlighted, it shows you it's just running that browser CMD, which in our case was Firefox. So if you type Firefox in any URL and So basically, it's just going to spam a bunch of windows for you with all of these searches pre-done. And that's the whole program. That's how it works. It's really, I like it. It's a bit hacky, but it's a nice example of like, you don't need to be a hardcore software engineer to make good tooling for yourself. If you've ever actually had to sit and look up an exploit for, like something that you've just found, you've run Nmap, you've scanned a system, you found out that it's running some piece of software manually. If you had to go and yourself and exploit DB and search in Metasploit and search all these other sites, it's time consuming, it's overhead. So this is a great example of how simple bash scripting and simple automation can actually save you a lot of time, as long as you're willing to put in a little bit of time to script it on the front end. Again, it's not perfect. This was obviously not written by a software engineer. It works, and when you're just writing simple tools for yourself, I think that's more than sufficient. You just need it to work, right? And this would save you a lot of time. Anyways, so that's it. Bit of a simple repo this time. But anyways, I hope you found that interesting. And that's it from me.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. I think it's funny because we could probably use this in our next segment. And they wanted a great intro, so I'm going to say, introducing Beautiful Gem, Bountiful Nash, and what's a good B word? Bodacious Lui. They're going to be giving you guys a rundown of Hack the Box, or at least Nash and Gem are going to give you a rundown of Hack the Box. So give you some red teaming there, and then it's kind of an intro to Hack the Box, and it's a fairly easy one. So it's a good introduction if you guys aren't familiar with Hack the Box. And then directly after that, we'll have Lui give a detailed explanation of how to defend this particular Hack the Box exploit. So without further ado, let me pull up. There you go. Awesome. Okay, take it away, guys.
Wow, what an amazing intro, Kurt. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, guys, so thanks so much for joining us. My name is Jem. I'm just getting to second year, hopefully in September. Just finished first year. I'm the community manager here at ISSessions. Yeah, this is my first talk ever, so hopefully you guys enjoy it. Before I came to this program, I studied music, audio engineering, music business, so definitely new to security, but trying to learn as much as I can. Nash?
And I'm Nash. I'm also finishing first year, going into second. I am the ISS treasurer. And just a little tidbit on my past, I studied forensics and chemistry. And an interesting fact about me is I have a paper in the Journal of Forensic Sciences. Louis?
Yep, and my name is Louis. I'm a third-year student. I'm a former ISSessions president and the current vice president. I'm currently doing my internship at Bell as a threat hunting intern, and I also help out with Derbicom and C3X, which, by the way, has been rescheduled until next year, and you should definitely join. More info coming about that. Over to you guys.
One thing that we wanted to highlight is Jem and myself don't really have a background in security or IT for that matter. And we just wanted to share that little tidbit just to show that you don't really have to have a ton of experience or a background in this field to get started. So as long as you're motivated and curious, you're eager to learn, you will succeed as long as you put in the work. So it's really just an invite for you to get curious and contribute whatever you can.
Definitely, yeah, especially for the newer guys like myself and Nash. Anything cool you guys learn, whether you're watching a YouTube video or you find an awesome blog and it teaches you something, whether you like it or maybe it teaches you what not to like. Come up here, give us a talk, let us kind of pick up some new things about what you're learning, and get started as soon as possible. We're super new to this, and we're just trying to put together bits and pieces of stuff that we learned to give you guys something. So definitely come up and give a talk. You don't have to be a pro. Yeah, do it.
So just an overview of our talk today. It's divided into two parts. The first part is a demonstration using Hack the Box, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The second part is a breakdown of the exploit that we actually use. The first part of our presentation is really designed for beginners who haven't had much exposure to using some of the tools that we're going to be using. So for the more experienced people, they might find that part easy. However, in the later part given by Louis, which he breaks down how the actual exploit works, for the more experienced individuals, they might find more benefit in that portion. So a little bit for both, or the variety of audience that we might have.
Awesome. So our presentation, at least mine and Nash's side of the presentation, will be done on a platform called Hack the Box. I'm sure many of you guys have heard about it. If you haven't, it's essentially just a website that's full of cool stuff like challenges. You got vulnerable boxes. Down the line through like a higher paid tier, you have access to these labs, pro labs, stuff like that. There's two different tiers of memberships. The free one is great. You get access to, I think, 10 active machines, which are super cool. There's no difference in quality between the paid membership and the free membership as far as the quality of the boxes go. But with the paid membership, what's cool is you get access to a huge collection of retired machines. And what makes the retired machines special is Hack the Box allows the users of the website to make these write-ups and walkthroughs, video walkthroughs and stuff on these machines. So for us newer guys, I mean, it's an awesome feature to be able to follow along in case you get stuck. Even on an easy box like the one that we're going to show you today, I don't know if I can say I would run through it without a walkthrough. I don't know if I'd understand everything. That being said, obviously the free one is a great place to start. You can kind of Google your way through some of these boxes, and you'll be learning a ton. One thing I definitely want to mention is Hack the Box is not the only platform out there. I'm not trying to push it. I don't work for Hack the Box or anything. There's a ton of other options. You can go with Try Hack Me is a newer one that's super popular. VulnHub is 100% free, and you get access to a huge amount of vulnerable machines that you can load up. Over the wire, Ring Zero. There's a lot of different options, but we're using Hack the Box for this presentation, so keep that in mind. So the box that we'll be doing is called Legacy, and it's actually one of those retired machines that I was talking about earlier. Even though it's super, beginner friendly and easy, that walkthrough definitely came in handy. Even with the walkthrough, I think at some parts we got like a little bit stuck, and things have changed since the walkthrough was posted, so we had to do some digging around ourselves. But the box is based on Windows, so it might be, a little bit easier for some of the newer guys like us. And one thing that I want to mention about these boxes and about CTFs and challenges in general is our objective is usually going to be to find flags, right? So you're looking for these flags, and what a flag is essentially it's a string of characters, and you can find it in all sorts of places. Sometimes there's actual flag files. Other times you have to, I don't know, do steganography and cryptography and do reverse engineering and find these these flags basically to submit. And some sites they're going to have like a specific format for you to upload the flag. So I remember last semester we were doing Pico CTF, and you had to actually put the flag inside of curly braces that followed you typing Pico CTF into the prompt, right? So they're all different. Keep up with the documentation and the stuff that's written on the website that you're using, but that's the goal, is we're trying to look for these two flags. Yeah.
Right. So the first thing that you'll need to do if you're working on Hack the Box is establish a VPN connection. The way they do it is you have to download a file directly from the website. So VPN, they use OpenVPN, which is widely used for work environments, home environments. And essentially what it is a point-to-point, you're basically establishing a point-to-point secure connection between yourself or your machine and the Hack the Box servers. So I will show you how to actually start the connection. I've already downloaded the file into my downloads folder. Also, if I navigate to the downloads folder and list what's there, right here we see the actual file. So we just run the command as sudo and we are using the most recent version of Kali. If you notice, the most recent version doesn't automatically log you in as root, so most of the commands that we end up running will require the sudo command beforehand. So now that we established the connection, what will happen is the OpenVPN will provide you with an IP address, and that will be important later on. But to determine the IP address, what we'll need to do is run ipconfig, and here is the tunnel IP address that it provides you. So you can either leave this tab open or jot down the IP address for when we are going to use it later.
Awesome. So now that we got that set up, I guess we'll just kind of get started. We'll start out with using Nmap, which is it's a network mapper. And before this phase, this is called the enumeration phase, I guess you could say, where you're collecting information to use to your advantage, I guess. And you can enumerate a ton of different things right now. Where collecting information about the ports, the open ports, the services that are running on them. But before this, you might start out with something called the reconnaissance phase. But luckily for us, Hack the Box kind of gives you the IP address and the stuff that you'll need to actually get started. So anyways, I'll quickly talk about some of the options here in the Nmap scan that Nash is doing while we wait for the results. The -T4 is the speed at which we're doing the scan. I think it ranges from -T0 to -T5 and going from slowest to fastest. And you might be asking yourself, why aren't we using -T5? If we can go faster, isn't that better? But with my limited knowledge and the amount of research that I've done so far, keep in mind I'm still new to this, I think -T5 is, it's faster, but it also makes a lot more noise. And that's not to say that Nmap is, silent when you keep it below -T5, not at all. But also I've read online that -T5 kind of opens up ways to make errors in your scan. So, you might get, erroneous readings of ports that are open or services that are running on those ports, that sort of thing. The really cool option here is -A. That actually replaces 3 different options: -SC, -SV, and -O. -O is it kind of makes Nmap take a couple of guesses of what the operating system might be. It's an operating system scanner sort of thing. -SV will actually tell you the version of the services that are running. So you'll see, if Nash scrolls up a tiny bit, you'll see the open ports, and then beside them the service name and then the version. And the coolest option that -A takes care of is -SC. And those are the Nmap scripts that actually were in Nick's presentation as well. You would have seen a folder there with the Nmap scripts that were part of that GitHub repo. And those are actually the coolest things because it'll actually do specific stuff to the services that that are open, and Nash will explain more about those when he goes over the results that you're seeing right now.
Great. So the first thing that we see right off the bat is the ports that are open. So we have ports 139 and ports 445. These are both SMB ports. What SMB is, it stands for Server Message Block, and it's essentially a protocol for remote file sharing. And the difference between 139 and 445 is 139 is pre-Windows 2000, while 445 is after. 139 allowed for Windows-to-Windows communication, and 445 allowed for communication between Windows machines and other machines over the internet. And if we look lower, we can actually see the outcome of the operating system scan. So here it's providing us with a guess that the operating system is Windows XP with a 92% accuracy. It also provides other estimates. So what's key here is that these are indeed estimates and not 100% accurate. So it gives you a starting point of where you may be able to look, because knowing the operating system is key when you're trying to do when you're trying to exploit a machine. And then if we scroll down, the results of the SC command, which is the script that's run, is given here. What's key here is the operating system is confirmed to be Windows XP. So what's happening here is Nmap sends an anonymous request to the target machine. The machine responds, and this is the information that our machine receives back. So knowing that we have open ports that are related to SMB, and we're working or we're targeting a Windows XP machine, we can look to see maybe if there's an exploit around those pieces of key information. So what we can simply do is open any browser and do a search for Windows XP SPB exploit. So initially we see the first link here is from Rapid7, which is the maker of Metasploit. Another key one, which was actually talked about or touched upon in Nick's presentation, is ExploitDB. ExploitDB is a really great resource for security individuals who are looking to see what exploits are available. But because we're going to be using Metasploit, we're going to be using the first link from Rapid7. And so they provided a description of the exploit and how it works at a very high level. Luwei will actually be going into a little bit more depth on what some of this information means, but it's key even as a beginner to read some of this. For example, in our scenario, it says that Windows XP targets seem to handle multiple successful exploitation events, but 2003 targets will often crash or hang on subsequent attempts. So this is kind of key to note if you were, for example, working in industry as a red teamer, that there is a risk involved to the host machine or the target machine that their system could potentially hang. But we were okay with that. We're obviously using this for a platform that expects us to do malicious things, and we are okay with those risks. So if you scroll down, one thing I'd like to point out here is the source code for the exploit. Luwei might touch upon this as well. It's beyond, obviously, my knowledge, but stay tuned. The part that we're going to be using for our demonstration is this command, which we're going to use this exploit. So what I'll do is just copy that. And it's going to be using the Metasploit framework. And so what we'll do is start up Metasploit.
Very cool. Thanks, Nash. Yeah, so in our case, we'll be using Metasploit. Metasploit's an awesome tool. It's a framework. It's loaded with tons of exploits. You can put your own custom exploits on there. You can customize the existing modules on there. Like I said, overall, really cool tool. It's written in Ruby. One thing you want to keep in mind, though, and especially as beginners, Metasploit is restricted for later on down the path when we actually go for stuff like OSCP or the PTP or other practical certs. We're not going to be able to use Metasploit. So from the beginning, even now, maybe we should get into the habit of thinking, how would we do this without Metasploit? Because technically everything you do with Metasploit is possible without Metasploit. And although it's a great tool, it's used by many, it's super powerful. When we're just learning these things and we're at the beginning of this long journey, it's probably going to be in our best interest to know how to do this stuff without, all the heavy lifting handled by something as powerful as Metasploit, right? So yeah, right from the beginning, just have that in the back of your mind when you're tackling these boxes. If you find a solution or a walkthrough that uses Metasploit, maybe try to think about how you would do it without using Metasploit. That's a little side spiel, but yeah. In our case, we will be using Metasploit. One thing to note here, Nash has already typed it in. We actually can search for exploits from within Metasploit, and this was also touched upon on with the Nick's presentation, but you don't actually have to Google anything. I mean, you could technically just look through the database that's within Metasploit, right? And let's say you didn't know that it was Windows XP, or you had less information than we do now. You could kind of just look through this list and say, all right, well, this one looks like it might work. This one looks like it might work, and kind of get an idea of where to start. They're also rated, right? You can see some of them are rated great, some are good, some are excellent. Even that could help you narrow down your choices, right? So a lot of options within Metasploit itself. In our case, we'll just copy paste from Google because we're just starting out. So let's see what happens. Awesome. So it looks like something changed here, which is always, I think it's a good thing to see the word exploit pop up there. What we'll want to do within Metasploit is obviously, well, not obviously, but we'd want to set the target that we want to, deliver this payload to, right? So we know from the Hack the Box dashboard that the IP of this target is 10.10.10.4. And then one very important step that kind of screwed me and Nash up for a while was we actually have to set our lhost to the OVPN IP that we get when we do that setup. So I think 10.10.14.39 it was. So definitely don't forget to set that. We can confirm our changes by typing in show options, and just to make sure everything worked. And it looks like it's good to go. So let's just, I don't know, fire it up. Let's type an exploit and see what happens. Stuff's happening, and boom. Okay, so this is obviously a lot of stuff just happened there between us typing exploit and us getting this interpreter shell, but I'm gonna let Loué, we're gonna let Loué kind of talk about the background stuff. What I want to mention here is this interpreter shell. If you guys have never had this, the newer guys, this is basically telling us that that's it, like we're in. This prompt right here is essentially not going to show up unless we're inside of the other machine. And there's a lot of different ways we can go about once we get to this point, but we'll start out with get UID, and just to confirm, what kind of privileges we have on this machine. Who exactly are we? Where are we? And that's very cool. So this isn't going to happen very often, but this is a beginner machine, and we've basically just gotten the interpreter shell, and right away we're, NT authority system, which basically means root in Linux speak, right? We have all the privileges. We can do whatever we want. We can fire up sysinfo, get some more information, see if we can see anything useful. Cool. So yeah, it confirms Windows XP Service Pack 3. We got legacy is the name. The domain is HTTP hack the box. Very cool. Let's, just for time's sake, let's start actually moving around here and see what we can find. So let's go right to the root. We'll start from there. We'll do so right now we're already in desktop, but let's just go to the root just to show how we would get to here otherwise. Sweet. So these all look very cool. If I had all the time in the world, I'd try to go through as many of them as possible, but we'll probably just start out with documents and settings, get to the meat and potatoes. And do a quick ls, and we can see, all right, we have a lot of cool options here as well. Admin and John look very cool. I'll start out with John just to see what the local user, the actual user of this machine is doing. And again, they all look very cool, but let's just go right into desktop and see what, quick saves this guy's been up to. And look at that. I think that might be our first flag. So if we just cat this out, we can take a look, and sure enough, yeah, that looks like a flag to me. So what we would do at this point basically is copy this, paste it into our Hack the Box dashboard underneath the legacy box, and just like that, I think this would be your first flag. You would just get this and be good to go. If we go up 2 levels though, there was another directory I really wanted to check out. If we do a quick ls, yeah, administrator looks very interesting. I definitely want to see what's in there. So maybe we'll do a quick cd, do another ls, and from there, yeah, again, all of these look pretty, but let's check out desktop. And I smell a root flag, hopefully, and look at that, amazing. Let's pop that sucker open and see what's in there. That's it, and 10 minutes or it's free, guys. Just like that, you're you got your first box done. You got the user and the root flag. And obviously, we simplified a lot of the stuff, and maybe it'd be a little bit longer, but that's all there is to it, really. This box is obviously super simple, but the good thing about these simple boxes is it actually gives you a ton of motivation. Like, I didn't do this the first time and think to myself, oh no, what a stupid easy box. Why did I waste my time doing it? I got my first 2 flags ever, and it felt pretty good, and it motivated me to go out and find, more easier boxes that I could try out and test these things that I just did and, learn. So definitely go out and do them. Don't get, discouraged by the fact that it looks kind of easy. Go out and do them, and you'll see the satisfaction you get from it.
Great. So, basically within our demonstration, we've showed how to run a basic nmap scan. We've showed the Metasploit framework at a very, very basic level. And we've actually used an exploit to pop a interpreter shell. All of this worked on the basis that there was a vulnerability in the target machine related to SMB. and Louis will take over and talk about how the actual SMB exploit works and ways to mitigate potentially having this happen on your system.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Nash and Jem. Kurt, are my slides up on the screen?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, sounds good. So let me just make sure everything works here. Yep, everything works. Okay, so hi everyone. So first of all, I just want to say, what a great job that Nash and Jem did in actually demonstrating the box. Jem, I remember last year would tell me, I don't know, like I would always ask him to do a talk, and then he would say to me, "Oh, I'm not really ready to kind of do a talk. I'm not in that mental space yet." So I'm really, really happy to see that he actually, decided to kind of, do this today. And I think they did a fantastic job. And on that note as well, can we just take a second to just recognize that we actually have 7 different people speaking right now, which, like, I remember last year, it used to be kind of like me, Nick, and Adam all the time, and then we would have guest speakers. But right now, like 4 or like 5 of the people that are actually involved with the exec team are speaking right now in this meeting. So really, just an awesome job, and I'm really happy with how much this community has grown, and we're gonna grow further. So let me get started. So what you just saw is essentially a demo of Hack the Box. And Hack the Box is great because it allows you to kind of see maybe like the red teaming and the exploitation side of things. But at the same time, here at ISSessions, we want to speak to all crowds. We want to speak to blue team, we want to speak to red team, and we want to show what's also happening under the hood. And that's exactly what I want to show you guys today. You saw this SMB exploit that was being used on a Windows XP machine. And what we're going to do right now is we're actually going to dig into this exploit and actually see exactly what is happening under the hood. Now, you can always go deeper. So I'm not going to get into like the reverse engineering side of things here because, well, I'm not a reverse engineer, and it would actually take a lot of time to do that. But I am going to go pretty deep, and hopefully this is going to kind of give you a nice introduction. Internals. Okay, so with that, let me get started. So let me just speak a little bit about, why should we dig deeper? And let's first start with kind of the red teaming perspective or the pen testing perspective. And the reason really is that a professional attacker needs to understand every aspect of the attack. You might have to use an exploit without using Metasploit. Because to be honest, Metasploit has been there for a very long time. It's very, very well researched. It leaves very well-known traces on the system. So stealth, if stealth is your objective, maybe Metasploit is not really the best option. So understanding how the exploit works and how to construct your own maybe custom script to do that exploit without Metasploit might be something that you might have to do on the job. And so this is one area of motivation. The other thing as well is that as a red teamer, right, there's this thing called purple teaming. So it's when the blue team and the red team kind of get together and they discuss what each has done. And part of that is actually explaining the techniques. You as a red teamer, you have to explain the techniques that you used for the red to the red team, to the blue team, to be able to improve their detections. And so if you can't explain what is going on under the hood, then you're not really being as effective as you can be on your job. It's always better to be able to give that detail, because at the end of the day, the goal is collaboration between the blue team and the red team to get this ideal, which is purple teaming. The other thing for why we should dig deeper, and I've already mentioned this, I want to present a well-rounded discussion here. So I don't want, a lot of people kind of think of Hack the Box as this thing where we all get to practice our exploitation skills and our pen testing skills. But actually, if you take a look at kind of what's going under the hood, you'll notice that it actually can be very valuable for defenders. So I know, so for example, at work, we have this thing called Hacker Tuesdays, where my team lead actually does a Hack the Box every Tuesday. And he ends up actually, we end up learning a lot from that because we kind of see the other side, not just the blue team side. So definitely something to look into as well. All right, so now that we have some motivation to keep going, let's actually talk about that vulnerability. So the vulnerability affects Windows XP systems, also Windows Server 2003, Vista, and Windows 2000. So it has pretty wide coverage. It was disclosed in October 28, 2008 by a researcher, an exploit researcher. His name is Brett Moore. And this was a very critical exploit. Microsoft eventually gave it the ID there, which is MS08-067. And it was considered critical and wormable. By the way, the Microsoft Security Bulletin does not exist anymore. I think they just go off of like CVE numbers now. And it was also assigned, CVE 2008 42550 by MITRE with a score of 10. And given its wide coverage and given the fact that it's a relatively stable exploit, this is why it was considered a big deal at the time, and probably the reason why they eventually ended up putting it in a Hack the Box box so that people can kind of practice exploiting it. So what's the big idea behind this vulnerability? So I'm just going to go back a little bit here. The vulnerability is called server service relative path stack corruption, and I'm going to dig into this pretty much every piece of this. But the big idea is that a path canonicalization, and canonicalization just means normalization, function in SMB server service does not properly parse relative paths. And when it doesn't properly parse those paths, it eventually causes a buffer overflow to occur on the stack. So I know there's a lot to unpack there. So let's start with what a buffer overflow actually is. And today, if you were here at the beginning of the meeting, you heard me talking to Yusuf about hummus. So what I'm going to do, as Yusuf requested, because apparently I haven't been mentioning his name.
I requested no such thing. Luai is making things up right now. I requested no such thing.
It's going to happen. I'm sorry, Yusuf. Okay, so a buffer overflow, without actually looking at all the diagrams that I'm going to show you here, is actually very simple. It's when a program reads input beyond the size of the buffer allocated to that input. So let me tell you a story. Okay. Imagine that Yusuf one day he found this girl that he really likes, and he asked her out on a date, and they were just about to go on that date. But Jem really also liked that girl. And so he wanted to also go out with her, and he doesn't want her to fall in love with Yusuf. So what does Jem do? He knows that Yusuf is an Arab, and Arabs love hummus. So what Jem, and he knows that Yusuf can't resist the taste of hummus. So what Jem does is he's basically goes up to Yusuf and he says, buddy, I have like 50 pounds of hummus for you. But here's the thing, Yusuf can only consume 35 pounds of hummus in a single day. But he can't help himself. He is going to consume 50 pounds of hummus. And so what's going to end up happening is that he's going to consume those 50 pounds of hummus. He's going to end up going on his date. He's going to puke all over the girl. And you know who's going to save the day? Jem. So the buffer is Yusuf. And Jem is the attacker. And the hummus is the payload. And if you followed that, great. If you didn't, I'll get to the serious explanation in a second. How did you like that, Yusuf?
Jem, are we going to have a problem, man? Like, what's going on, Jem?
I can't breathe. I actually can't breathe.
Are we going to have a problem, my guy?
All right. So let me actually explain buffer overflows. But are you satisfied, Yusuf? Are you satisfied that you've been mentioned?
I never asked for this, but sure. I'm satisfied. If that's the answer you're looking for, I'm satisfied.
Okay. So anyway, let me keep going. So a buffer overflow again occurs when a program reads input beyond the size of the buffer that is allocated for that input. So what I have here is a diagram which shows a rough kind of layout of what process memory looks like. Every process has the OS kernel space mapped into it. It has a bunch of libraries that it loads, and those are, of course, loaded into memory. It has this thing called the stack, which has statically allocated memory. So this is like your local variables and function parameters. And of course, we know that the stack grows downward. We also have this heap, and the heap has dynamically allocated memory in it. So if you've programmed in C before, and you've used malloc, this is where that memory would be allocated. The heap kind of starts at 0 bytes, and then it grows over time, and it grows upwards. And we also have these other sections like BSS for uninitialized variables. We have explicitly initialized variables in the data section. And then we have the actual binary image or the assembly instructions themselves in the text segment. So this is what a stack looks like. And a stack is comprised of stack frames. So each stack frame actually represents a function call in our program. So when foo calls bar, it is going to set up a stack frame for foo, and then another stack frame is going to be set up for bar. And as I said, each stack frame contains certain things. So foo is going to contain the parameters that it wants to pass into bar, and bar is going to contain the local variables that I've defined in bar. So if in bar, I have like A is equal to 0 and B is equal to 1, those are going to show up in here, right? And essentially the buffer that we're going to overflow today is one of these local variables. The stack also has other things, of course, and I'm actually not even showing everything here today. So there's like caller save registers and callee save registers and stuff like that. But it also has this thing called the return address. And what you can do is if you, for example, insert, a whole bunch of, input into a buffer, and there's no like bound checking in the code. It's not checking, okay, you're only supposed to insert like 50 bytes into this buffer. What's going to end up happening if you're like an attacker, you're going to overflow that buffer, and your goal really is to overwrite this return address here. Because as soon as you overwrite this return address, once this function returns, it's going to go to it wherever the instruction pointer or the thing that is executing the code, it's going to go to wherever this return address points to. And so when you end up, when this function ends up returns and you've smashed the stack and replaced the return address, it's going to go and execute something that is in your control. And this can be like this can be shellcode that you've inserted into that buffer. This could be like code that exists somewhere else in memory. So it's really up to you where you want to go. And there are protections for this, and we'll kind of get there as well. So just to recap, so what the attacker's goal is that we want to overflow the buffer that is allocated to a local variable to the point where we overwrite the return address with our own pointing elsewhere in memory, presumably our shellcode. And in this case, this is true. We're going to point to shellcode, and we're also going to point somewhere else in memory, and I'll explain why we do that. So this is just another diagram. So I can insert a whole bunch of A's here, right? And eventually I can go return to shellcode or anywhere really. Actually, not anywhere. You can't really return to the kernel space probably, because that would cause like a seg fault, but somewhere that you can return that is not the kernel space. Okay, so now that we understand kind of how buffer overflows work, let's talk about SMB. And SMB stands for Server Message Block. Server Message Block is actually used for two things. Most people know it as a protocol that actually facilitates the sharing of files, directories, and printers across a network. And so essentially you can set up a share, and if somebody on like a remote computer wants to access your share, they can do that. Same thing with printers. So that is facilitated by SMB. But today we're actually concerned with another side to SMB. And the other side is actually SMB allows you to access services on remote hosts using this thing called the IPC share. So I'll get back to this, but let me just kind of flesh out SMB a little bit more. So on Linux, for example, you can connect to an SMB share. So this is actually called it's an admin share called the C $share, which just points to the C drive on a remote host. So I can actually connect to the server, and if I want to get access to the C folder, I would connect to this. Now you do have to be root to be able to do this, or you can really connect to any user-defined share. On Windows, it's pretty much the same thing. You can mount a drive using net. So you can actually mount, for example, the admin share on the P drive. This, of course, I missed the thing. It points to C/Windows. So you can actually mount C/Windows of another computer on your local server, which is really cool. And then to list shares, you can also do this. But let's come back to this IPC share. IPC actually stands for inter-process communication. And what the IPC share is, it's this concept that Windows introduced. It's also known as a null session connection. And the reason is you can actually connect to the IPC share anonymously, and you can request services on that remote hosts. So what am I talking about when I say request services? So you can actually enumerate like local accounts. You can enumerate network shares. So of course, every box has a number of services that are running on it. So in Linux, it's systemd. In Windows, you can see all the services under the services.msc GUI kind of feature. And so what you can actually do with SMB is you can connect to this IPC share, and you can enumerate local accounts, you can enumerate network shares, you can schedule tasks, you can start and stop services. And the way that you actually connect is using these things called named pipes. And named pipes are an inter-process communication mechanism. There are two types of pipes. The first type of pipe is an anonymous pipe, and you can see this typically whenever a parent creates a child process. When the parent process creates a child process, they're typically communicating through anonymous pipe. A named pipe is a little bit different. It allows for not one-way communication like an anonymous pipe, but it allows for two-way communication. And so essentially what you would do to request a service is you would establish this SMB connection. So this is you, the client, for example, and this is the server that you want to connect to. So you would establish this SMB connection to port 445. You would connect to an IPC share. You would then communicate with the process that's down here. So let's say we want to communicate with the server service. What we would do is we would actually, again, connect to SMB, bind to this IPC share, and then get a handle to this named pipe here called the server service named pipe, which then is going to allow us to call functions inside of server service and therefore request services from this service that is running in memory. To actually connect to a service, you actually have to refer to that service using something called the remote procedure call. I'm not really going to get into what remote procedure call is, but just know that you can use this thing called remote procedure call over SMB in order to request these services. The way you do that is you can request a certain named pipe using its UUID, so it's universally unique identifier. So you can't do it by name, unfortunately. And then you would use RPC by calling the RPC function number that is associated with the function that we need. All right, so now that you kind of understand how the IPC share works and how we can actually call functions on remote computers, let's actually take a look at our exploit and how that works. So you've probably guessed it by now. Essentially, what is happening is that there is a function. So if you remember, when we started, we said that this is a server service relative path stack corruption. So the server service here turns out to have, it turns out that it has a function called ntpr path canonicalize. And this function does not know how to parse relative SMB paths correctly. Let me talk a little bit about what actually canonicalization is. So you can see here, when I have the tilde here, it actually refers to the home directory, for example. So I'm kind of mixing Windows and Linux here, so I apologize for that. I didn't realize I was doing that. But the point is, it's going to convert these special characters into whatever the full path is. Or if you, for example, have a relative path like this, it's going to go and actually convert it to whatever the absolute path is. And the reason there is a function like this, so this is actually common in for web server protections. So imagine you have like a directory traversal attack for those that are passionate about web attacks and web exploitation. So a canonicalization function is often used to kind of get rid of these special characters as per the host's standard, so that you can't, for example, navigate to a directory that you're not supposed to be able to access on the web server. But anyway, I digress. Basically, this function here is implemented in net API 32.dll. And this is a library that is imported by the SMB server service. And we're going to be exploiting this function here, which is netpr path canonicalize. Okay, so how are we actually going to exploit this function? So now, what if I actually pass a path like this? So I say, okay, I want you to go to my server for // my server. So this actually turns out to be an invalid path, right? So if you think about it, this is going back twice. So that is not going to actually get you anywhere. Generally, on any operating system, if you try to go back more times than there are directories to go back, what's going to end up happening is that you're going to just end up at the root directory. But in this case, in this function, once you pass an invalid path like this, that is going to actually cause a buffer overflow. And what's going to end up happening in that function is that it's going to strip this part here, and what is going to be left in our buffer is just whatever is after the last / here. And so essentially when we construct our payload, we have to insert something here that is eventually going to smash our stack and overflow our buffer. To be honest, I have no idea why this causes a buffer overflow. So I don't understand the mechanics. So Microsoft, back in 2008 was not as open as they are today. So they don't really disclose a lot of information about their vulnerabilities. Of course, I could still find out. So if I actually take this net API 32.dll and I go and I reverse engineer it, or for example, I take the patch and I kind of diff the vulnerable version with the patched version and I see what they changed, then maybe I would be able to see, okay, I see how this buffer is being overflown. But I'm kind of considering that out of scope for our presentation today, is just because that's going to get into a lot of the nitty gritty and that takes a lot of time and I don't really have that much time to give. But just take it on faith, there's a buffer overflow there. Well, you don't have to take it on faith, we've demonstrated it. So let's actually now construct our payload. So remember, we need a path like this. And remember, anything that is after this last / is where our payload is going to go. So what our payload should look like is, first, we do have to actually we do actually have to put these in, like the starting part, because there are a couple of checks that verify that these exist. So these are indeed required. So basically, you can put a couple of / here, really any set of random characters. Then you have to put your relative path there, and this is going to end up triggering that bug. And then finally, we have to actually put the things that are going to end up in our buffer. What's going to end up in our buffer? Well, first we have our shellcode. And you might want to put in like a no-op slide or something like that here to make it easier to get to the shellcode. And shellcode is just this thing that will eventually, it's just some code, some assembly instructions that are eventually going to give us shell. Then we're going to put some padding. We're going to overwrite the saved EPP. Don't worry too much about what this is. It doesn't really matter in this context. Then we actually have to return to two places. And this is really interesting. So first, we have to return to this other function called ntSetInformationProcess in acgeneral.dll. And the reason we have to do that is we have to disable this thing called the NX bit. And the NX bit is actually in, the NX bit is actually this. Okay, so let me take a step back. So in process, you can actually set permissions on process memory. So you can say that this part of memory should be considered non-executable. I told you that your shellcode is, of course, executable instructions. So one memory protection that is often put in place at the stack level is to disable any kind of code execution on the stack. And if we don't bypass this, essentially, even though we insert our shellcode here, it's not going to execute as code, therefore it's not going to do anything. But for whatever reason, it turns out that the process that actually the process that we're attacking here, which is actually just an instance of svc host.exe, ends up importing this AC general DLL, which has this function which allows us to disable the no execute bit. And so what we have to do is first jump to that, disable the no execute bit, and then go back and then return again and jump to our shellcode. So what does this actually, and that would eventually give us shell, of course. So what does this actually look on the stack? So as I said, this is the start of our output buffer. So maybe here, we're going to insert some no op slide. We're going to insert our shellcode. We're going to insert, some padding. Again, overwrite the save DVP. We're going to return first to NT set information process. And so as I said, so of course, this here is a function. This is our NT path canonicalized function. Eventually, we're going to return from this function, and we are going to go to NT set information process. It's going to set up its own stack frame, and it's going to disable that NX bit. And then eventually, it needs somewhere to return as well. So it's going to return to a jumper, which is just another kind of return address that points way down here to our shellcode. And once we've done that, we will have shell, and we're going to get that meterpreter shell that you saw earlier. Just a couple of caveats that I want to mention here. I am obscuring a lot. So this is first of all, just note that this is a 32-bit architecture. These boxes don't necessarily represent like a 4-byte boundary. So this might actually, be multiple 4-byte boundaries. The shellcode, if you can do the shellcode in 4 bytes, great, but usually you're going to need more space. So just bear that in mind. This is just meant to be like a simplified representation. All right, so that's how the vulnerability works. Just to kind of recap our exploitation flow. So there is us, we're the client, so we're the attacker machine. That's what Nash and Gem were doing. What they actually did is they bound to this IPC share over port 445, sorry. Then they connected to this named pipe to communicate with the server service, and they inserted a payload called netpr path canonicalize in the API 32.dll, and this eventually overflowed the buffer and gave them shell. Another thing that you should be aware of is, so before I get to the next part, is this pipe here has a certain UUID, and again, this function has a certain function number, and this is going to be important for our detections. Okay, so how can we actually defend against this? Well, there are two sides to the coin. So one, we can do like prevention, or mitigation, and we can also do detection. So let's start with prevention and mitigation, and let's start on the host side. So one thing you can do is you can disable the browser and server service completely. So this is the service that has netpr path canonicalize in it. But actually, if you do that, you're going to end up disabling all of SMB. And if you're in a corporate environment, that's probably not going to be something that you want. Because you might have like an application at work that depends on SMB and is looking for something in that share, for example, or there might be an agent that goes and scans, uses that IPC share to actually go and find some information about hosts, maybe like an inventory agent. So doing this is not always kind of the best way to do it. Another option that you can take is using group policy. So what you can do is you can prevent any kind of anonymous access to named pipes. And you can actually specify which named pipes later on. So you can actually whitelist some named pipes that can be accessed anonymously. So what we can do is we can, take this server service named pipe here and say, okay, no one can connect to that server service named pipe. No one can anonymously connect to that server service named pipe. That's a solution as well. It's not the best solution because just because you can't prevent anonymous access does not mean that you can't prevent access. So it just basically means that the attacker needs some creds, and creds are usually not very hard to find. to be able to connect to that named pipe. So this is kind of like a very, I guess, a blunt edge instrument, if you want to think about it that way. And it's kind of weird because Windows actually does not allow you to set permissions. So we spoke about all of these, default named pipes here. You can't actually go and set an ACL. Like this person can read this person can write that to the named pipe. They actually don't allow you to do this. You can do it like programmatically, like using the Win32 API, but you can't do it through the GUI or through some like configuration. As far as I know, and as far as the research that I've done, if anyone actually has found a way to be able to do this, that would be something that I would be very interested in finding out about. Okay, so that's prevention mitigation on the host. Again, the options are not very great. And again, this is a reason why this vulnerability is so serious. On the network, though, you can, block port 445, kind of like the same effect. You're going to block all access to SMB. If you are lucky enough, though, to be using Windows Vista or Windows Server 2008, what you can do is you can actually filter those remote procedure calls that I actually spoke about by UUID. So you can actually add a rule to the firewall that says, okay, if you see this UUID, which, by the way, is associated with that server service, then don't allow any connections to go through. And this is really cool. The Windows firewall is insanely powerful, and it's often underused. So that's a way to actually do it on the network side as well. What I think though is gonna if you're in a very complex environment though, you might have to just settle for making sure that your network is well segmented, that only people that actually can reach that box, only a very specific set of computers can actually reach that box that has the vulnerability. And of course, if you know about the vulnerability, you can always patch it. But here we're just assuming that, you maybe have like 2 to 3 weeks before you can patch it or whatever. And for the final protection, and this is not really for the defenders, but maybe for the people who actually wrote that function, that vulnerable function, is maybe we should be writing better code, doing bounds checking. And why in the world? Like I feel like it should be harder to be able to do this. Why can I disable the no execute bit from inside the process? This seems kind of weird to me. It should definitely be harder, but I defer to someone who's more experienced to kind of explain why is this something that you can do. I don't know if this is still possible in like newer versions of Windows, but in Windows XP, if you can just basically jump to that function, then it's kind of defeats the purpose of the whole protection. On the detection side, though, I really like this solution. This is actually a snort rule. If you don't know what snort is, it's an IDPS. And what the snort rule is doing, it's actually looking for very, very specific things. So if you're concerned that your analysts, for example, are tired and they have too many things to look through, this will definitely tell you this is a known bad. Someone needs to take a look. And what this is doing, it's basically monitoring any connection to port 445 that has that UUID for the server service that I spoke about. It also will look for the specific byte sequence that represents that specific function number, and it's going to look for the relative path as well in that packet that is being sent. So this actually just corresponds to .. // And another thing you can do is you can do some detection on the host. So one thing that I kind of mentioned briefly, essentially net.api.dll has that vulnerable function, and that function is in fact imported by svchost.exe. So you can always look for svchost.exe launching like a cmd.exe or a PowerShell.exe. I mean, this will work if the attacker is like right away launching shell, returning a shell, but shellcode does not necessarily always spawn a shell. You can do, it's basically, there's CPU instructions. You can do whatever you want. So you can inject into another process. You can download something onto the system. So this is not going to always be telling you that that exploit has been exploited. Another thing that you can actually look into, which I didn't have a chance to look into, is looking into the actual SMB log that Windows maintains. I didn't really have time to do this, but you might also find a good detection to build there. Now, obviously, you're not going to have to build these detections. This is a Windows XP box, but I hope I've presented kind of a good overview of the process of actually studying an exploit and building detections for it, and starting to think about all the different things that go into it. And with that being said, I want to thank you all very much for listening to me talk for like 30 minutes or something. And I also want to thank Jem and Nishad for agreeing to do this with me. It was really fun doing this project with them. And without further ado, if you have any questions, please let us know.
Yeah, I'm gonna say great job, guys. Thank you, Luai, for taking his valuable time to do this. I don't think you guys realize, but he is really busy and still supports us quite well, even with all his work. And then Jem and Nash as well. They're first years. So like, as they said, if anybody's feeling discouraged from doing a presentation, like they couldn't do it, reach out to us and we can help you put on a presentation. I'm more than willing to help new people that want to get into this. I do have a question for you, Luai.
Sure, yeah.
You said it affects Windows 2008, correct?
It does, yeah.
Yeah, so have you tried GFI LandGuard? I hear it's pretty good.
Oh my god. Okay, we have to explain this joke. we have people that, okay. Okay, do you want to take this one? Who wants to take this one?
Maybe we shouldn't explain the joke. I think it'd be better if we don't.
Won't they find out eventually? I mean,
it was okay. So no, it's okay. Let's explain. So
right,
basically, in one of our classes, we have to do this one assignment that uses GFI LandGuard, and the whole point of using this is to basically use software that is like very, very deprecated and trying to basically bring it back to life. And if you're in second year, this is basically like the nightmare scenario. Like that week when you have to do that, it's just you just want to go climb under a blanket, sip some hot chocolate afterwards, and just forget about life. It was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life, and I think a lot of people in this program agree. Anyway, do you have any serious questions?
well said.
Luai,
Yeah.
thank you for the presentation. It was really good. You said the NBT bit. Why do you like turn that off after you do the shellcode? Why not turn it off at the start? I missed that bit.
Sorry? Are you referring to the no execute bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, no problem. So I can go back. Where did I have that? Yes, here. Yeah. So what the next no execute bit does is, so remember I showed you kind of like a view of the stack here. And let's say I insert some shellcode into here, right? If I don't disable that no execute bit, and the no execute bit is actually set on that process, basically any code that I insert here that is eventually going to be executed will not end up getting executed as code. It's not going to eventually give you a shell because whoever started that process has set a memory protection that says that nothing in the stack should be executable. So what we have to do is we have to jump to this function called ntSetInformationProcess, which whose whole job is to actually disable the no execute bit. So it does a few things as well, but it's going to disable the no execute bit first, and then after we've disabled that no execute bit, then we can actually jump to our shellcode, because now that protection doesn't exist anymore, and we can execute code on the stack, which is eventually going to give us back our shell. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you just run that function first before you do that, before you run your shellcode, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Actually, if you've taken like Nick's or one of Nick's classes, like secure software development, or really anyone else who teaches that course, you should have talked about this thing called return to libc attacks. So this would be kind of a similar concept where you're returning to a library that's already been loaded in memory to accomplish something. and then you might come back to your shellcode, but sometimes it's not even necessary to do that, right? Maybe the code that is actually already in memory is enough for you to accomplish whatever it is that you need to accomplish. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I guess I got one. So I was curious about running basically the implications of running this exploit against the SMB service in terms of the stability and how it would actually affect the stability of the SMB service. So would this if once the shell disconnects, or once you disconnect from the shell connection after you're finished with post exploitation, does the SMB service does it crash out, or does it continue to run, or are you guys sure what happens there? Just curious.
Sure. Is it okay if I take this one, Nishad and Jem?
Absolutely, dude. Go for it.
Go for it.
Okay, sounds good. So, to be honest, I haven't tested it. I'm not sure if Nishad or Jem have, but I know that in the notes for this exploit. So if I actually show you, let me see here. So if I show you the actual notes for the Metasploit module, which is, by the way, where I got most of the information for this presentation. So it actually says somewhere here that Windows XP targets seem to be able to handle multiple exploitation events pretty well. So the stability is not affected. But 2003 targets seem to have more problems. I'm not sure how, there's nothing stated here about like 2008 targets. So that would be something that would have to be tested. But at least for XP, it seems to be pretty stable.
Okay, cool. Thanks, guys.
So that's interesting. You just pulled up this file. So I was wondering if you could just share with me, and I'm assuming other people would want to know this. How do you, like, say I'm Elliot Alderson. I'm going all in, and I get through a lot. I accomplish a lot, but I want to know exactly what I'm doing. How did you guys per se, and for all three of you guys, how did you guys go about, I guess, your research, your breaking down of the exploit? What did you guys do to kind of get all that information, all those details?
Jem and Nash, do you guys want to go first?
I know in my case, I was, I started out by watching a couple of walkthroughs. I actually hadn't even attempted the machine because this was my first time doing anything even remotely close to this. So when you had asked me if I wanted to do something like this, I wanted to, watch it be done to see if, I'm confident enough to actually take on something like this. But my entire resources have been, they actually have like listed walkthroughs, and I followed up with a couple of those, watched some videos, and then anything I wasn't sure of, like some of the more finer details of what SMB is and how it works. Obviously, I googled on the side, but yeah, my resources just started with the actual posts within the Hack the Box website, and then from there it was kind of a branching off. And I mean, if I listed all the links that I looked through during this presentation, or during the prepping of this presentation, it would definitely be 20, 30 different links, right? Just because every time I had a question, I would Google it, but I'm sure Loué's prep was a lot more structured and a lot more detailed. Mine was being new to security. Mine was very like top level explanation of everything, right? Like there's so much for me to learn that I can't go as in depth as Loué did. That's for sure.
Right.
Maybe Nash's process was different.
No, pretty much the same. Like as you said, Google was my friend throughout the whole thing. The more difficult details, I definitely reached out to like internally, like our group members as well, if there was something that we didn't understand, or maybe even something that we were misstating. So, I mean, the best resource that we found were really the tutorials. YouTube was pretty good in finding, avenues to investigate.
Yeah, YouTube is huge.
And just the community around us, if there was individuals who knew something that we didn't, we would just ask.
Nice. Appreciate that, guys.
So from my end, a lot of the information was actually gathered And this is kind of like what Metasploit is great for. You can actually, just by reading the code here, you can actually see like a ton of content. Now, unfortunately, all the code is in Ruby, so I don't know any Ruby. But I mean, it's not too bad. It's actually very like it's a lot like Python, to be honest. But if you kind of stare at the code, and when I first read it, like I didn't really understand much, but then you keep coming back to it like day in and day out, and you start kind of picking up more and more and more things, and then you come up across a whole bunch of different things that you didn't know about. You Google them, and the Microsoft documentation is also pretty great to fill in some of the gaps. So that's another place where I found a lot of resources, especially about like the IPC share and how SMB works and stuff like that. So actually, maybe I can just show you. So you can see here that this module actually does some targeting, and because it actually depends on the service pack and the language that we have to use, the return address and the EBP that we have to overwrite actually change with every kind of version. So XP is going to be different than 2003. Service Pack 1 is going to be different than Service Pack 2, that kind of thing. I should also note that I actually did show, pretty much the easiest way to actually exploit this vulnerability. Certain service packs, it's actually a lot more work. So you might have to go up against ASLR. You might have to use this thing called return on programming. So this stuff, to be honest, I still don't understand. But baby steps and just kind of trying to go into the simplest thing first, so that then you can build on it later. So as you can see, there's a ton of targets here. It's picking all the targets. It keeps going through that. There's some information about the actual function right here. This is our output buffer. You can see that this is the exploit function. This is where the actual exploitation logic happens. It's going to pick the target first. Then it is going to start actually generating that payload. So this is like our jumper, and it's going to put a whole bunch of things into it. This payload construction, so this should like be really familiar because you kind of saw something equivalent on my slide. So you start with the path, you do a few random characters here, you put in the shell code, you put in this thing to kind of trigger the bug. So there's like a ton of information here and a whole bunch of notes that you can kind of refer to, and you kind of guess. Like they're not going to put everything, but you kind of guess what's happening. And if you can't guess, that's why I said at one point, like, to know more, I just had to basically reverse engineer the DLL, and I'm not going to do that. And that's kind of where you stop. And I thought, I had enough information to kind of give a good presentation. But you see, there's kind of 3 different versions of the actual exploit. So this is for 2003 targets. There's a whole bunch of like Service Pack 2, Service Pack 3 targets. This uses something called return on programming and stagers and stuff like that. And what I did was actually Windows 2000 XP 2003, which is kind of like the simplest of all of them. And you see here, like, I mentioned this thing called RPC. So Ruby has this RPC library that you can use. I'm requesting a handle to that service. I'm binding to that handle, that named pipe. Then I'm creating kind of a function stub, and I'm calling that function as if I was on localhost. So yeah, I mean, there's a ton of information here, and basically just Googling every line and trying to figure out exactly what each thing is doing. It does take a very long time, but eventually you start like connecting the dots and everything starts to make sense. So hopefully I've answered that question. Maybe I've answered that question too well and taken 10 minutes to answer that question.
I know we're kind of scrunched for time, but I actually had a quick question as well. Just based off of what you said, you just said that if you wanted to learn more about this, what you would have to do is essentially reverse engineer that DLL, right? Like that would be the only way.
If you want to go even deeper than what I've already shown,
Okay.
yes.
So my question essentially is this, and this is going to be like a super noobish question. Like I don't even know if I'm going to be able to articulate what I'm thinking in my head, but I'll give it a shot. So like you made this, this presentation, and you broke down all the stuff by Googling and researching all the information, and you understand it to a point, and I tried to follow along as much as I could. But let's just say now that you don't have the resources for this because this doesn't exist yet. You're coming up with this as a security researcher or even a threat actor. What level of how do I say this? Like not what level of education, but like how would you approach finding something like this as a researcher? Let's say, do you need to have like, you know, a really deep, you know, traditional CS background, or could you just, you know, could a self-taught person get to this level to actually discover something like this? And again, you know, forgive me, I know this is sounding super ignorant, like very, you know, low level thinking, but I'm just curious, like if you're just saying that you're scratching the surface by doing all this research, how does someone even come up with something like this just as a, you know, just as a one person show, you know, just doing their own research? Yeah, what are your thoughts? And maybe you can kind of help me, if you understand, you know, even remotely what I'm saying here, maybe you can kind of help me ask my question better and answer it, if you don't mind, Louis.
Yeah, no. I understand. I understand what you're saying. So you're asking kind of, you know, if this vulnerability was not known, how do you go about actually finding this vulnerability? Is that correct?
Something like it. That's exactly it. Yeah, as a you know,
Okay.
one man show, how do you find something like this without knowing that it exists? Exactly.
So to be honest, I'm very unqualified to answer this question. But I mean, I just a couple of thoughts. So I know that companies, you know, provide like bug bounty programs. So they do try to motivate people to kind of convert their technical skills into something that is targeted, to try and find vulnerabilities. So that kind of acts as an incentive. So that's kind of like one avenue that you can take to go and practice and, you know, play around with the stuff. You obviously have to have a very good understanding of the basics first.
That's exactly what spawned my question about this. Is, you know, I've been following some bug bounty guys on Twitter and watching some videos, but I'm curious for something like that's this advanced, you know, and this isn't even like it's a website or a web app, right? Like you're doing some low level stuff here. That's why I was kind of asking this, like how would you go about, what level are these guys at, and you know, how would you go about thinking about approaching something like this?
I think most of those people actually do it as like a hobby at first, where it's just like, you know, like there's a ton of YouTubers who like started like reverse engineering like Nintendo 64 games or whatever. And you know, they start with something small like that, and then they eventually kind of turn that into a skill with repetition. Um, I don't know if I'm answering this well. Nick, I don't know if you're still there. If you could maybe kind of offer some thoughts. And Nick is
Oh, I
not
think he's
here.
gone.
Okay.
It's all good, man. I don't even really know what the question that I am asking is. Like, it kind of is just like, how would you get started with something at this, you know?
Actually, Jem, I might have something to add if it's all right with you.
Please.
So for me, like when I started developing web apps and things like that, like obviously like a web application is super complicated, right? But I think the biggest mistake that we make as beginners is that when we're learning, we try to digest the entire process or program as one piece. Yet when we develop, obviously most of us here understand how we use functions and we segment our programs. That's how we have to learn. I mean, you're not going to build a web application without understanding, you know, basic programming. You're also not going to build it without understanding basic networking. So like Louis was saying, it's all about combining the basics and having strong basics and putting them together and understanding it piece by piece, as opposed to trying to digest the whole thing. I mean, you're not going to. This guy didn't write this program in one shot with one singular idea. He wrote it and developed it, and I think we have to start teaching ourselves to learn that way too, because I think we try to learn backwards, and that's what makes it really, really hard.
Totally. I definitely get what you're saying. And I do agree too. What I'm curious about is before this Metasploit module got written, like I'm sure, you know, this wasn't the first utilization of this exploit, right? This code that we're looking at here is it being repurposed, I guess, as a module in Metasploit. I might be wrong about this. I'm totally just guessing, but I don't imagine the first discovery of this exploit came out as a Metasploit module. So even before we write it out into something like this, you know, using whatever language, finding the exploit itself, it's like, you know, do you think about, all right, so I know all about SMBI, I read all the documentation, let me dig deeper by reverse engineering the DLLs, or is it something that Nash had mentioned earlier? I was talking to him about this, and he said maybe it's something like, you know, what happens by accident. You're using the service and something weird happens and you recreate the bug, and then you kind of say, oh, wait a minute, this is interesting. So that's what I'm kind of curious about, but my head is all over the place. So I'm not even, you know, I don't even know if I can get an answer because I don't really know what question I'm asking. I guess I'm kind of rambling.
Maybe I can try jumping in. Like,
Yes,
what, you
please.
know, like this exploit is like requires like advanced like Windows knowledge. For example, you can start off with looking for bugs by just poking around and seeing what the limits are, right? Because that's what I assume. Like these researchers are. You understand something and say, okay, can I do this thing? Can I do this thing? So kind of like taking it a step by step, understanding, having a good understanding of the technology definitely makes sense, and then seeing what those limits are, what those boundaries are, keep poking at them until you get because a vulnerability is basically unintended consequence, an unintended outcome, right? An unexpected outcome. So that's basically what you first have to find a flaw, and then you have to see, okay, can I weaponize this flaw? And then that becomes a vulnerability.
Very interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. It actually kind of reiterates what Jamie's saying, right? Your fundamentals have to be so strong that you can, get to the point where you can push those limits and use the most basic stuff in ways that you know well enough to use in other ways or try to use in other ways. Definitely makes a lot of sense.
Right. And there are some common things that, for example, you'll know, like as you'll pick up as a programmer doing this stuff. Like for example, like if you look at OWASP top 10, right?
Yep.
That's a good, I'd imagine that's a good starting point if you want to do some research, understand those common mistakes and how to replicate them and how to search for them in other contexts would be also a good point, a good starting point. That's also something that you can look into.
Totally. No, very cool. I definitely will dig through the OWASP top 10 deeper. Thanks.
Cool.
Awesome.
Great. Thanks, guys. Great questions. Thanks for everybody for showing up.
Kurt, can I just say something just before? It's actually about you.
Okay. Go
just
for
before
it.
you conclude. Okay. Sounds good.
I'll
Okay. So I just want to say that just before we wrap up, I know, Kurt is kind of that person that kind of speaks for the first 5 minutes and then you kind of don't hear from him again. And this was me last year, and nobody ever said this for me, but I just want to say it for Kurt because I think it's important. A lot of work goes behind the scenes to put these meetings together and to keep everybody organized. And we do rehearsals for this stuff. We're working on workshops right now, and we meet every Sunday and stuff like that. And Kurt is really the person that is actually setting all of this up and facilitating this. So, I don't know if we can do a successful round of applause for Kurt, but maybe we can all nod our heads for our great president.
Thank you, Lai. It's very nice of you. I still think you do way more work than me, but I'll take it.
You made a website in a week. What?
Jamie makes websites all the time. It's fine. But yeah, thank
Give
you.
it up for Kurt. Kurt's the man, guys. Kurt holds us all together and really. Yeah, no, seriously, I'm going to interrupt because Kurt does so much. Like, yeah, Kurt. Kurt is Kurt's the whole thing, guys. Kurt runs the show and does everything for us and just keeps us in line. So you owe him a big thanks.
Thanks, guys. I'm gonna cry.
I'm not crying. You're crying.
Here, I'm gonna put up a picture of hummus. I've been waiting for that. But yeah, no, thank you everybody for coming. This means a lot that you show up to our sessions. We put a lot of hard work into it. There's a lot of presenters here today, so thank you to everybody that presented. Yeah, and we'll have another meeting next month. Hopefully it's as jam-packed and detailed as this. But yeah, thank you everybody. That's it. You can go home. Wait, hold on.
There's no after the show banter.
No, there's some banter. I can do.
Did someone say banter?
That's my middle name.
Oh,
wow!
Oh man.
That's hilarious.
That's funny.
Yusuf.
All right.
Yeah.
Take care, guys, for next month.
See you, Adam.
Yeah.